In this video, you will learn how to use AI to analyze your AppsFlyer data. And we can see how different AI features can help you drastically cut the time it takes you to get to an actionable insight. I have helped over 100 companies get more insights out of their data, and now AI is making it easier than ever before. AppsFlyer, at the time of this recording, has 3 different AI approaches, each one suited for a different purpose. Let's get started with approach number 1. One of the things that AppsFlyer added in terms of AI is called the AI assistant. This is typically a widget or a chat bot that exists within the interface of AppsFlyer, and you can then ask questions about your data. Let me show you how that works. When you land on the AppsFlyer product, you will see this little icon here. The assistant is available, I think, pretty much every page. You open it and you get the chatbot interface. It gives you initial prompts or questions that you can ask. Now, I have a question here that we can try here. We just want to see any trends between organic and non-organic installs over the last 90 days. 90 days is a nice long period where we can start to see if there are any noticeable patterns that we need to be aware of and that may require any action on our side. We ask the question up here, and within a few seconds, I think it's probably maybe 30 seconds, AppsFlyer then went and got the data. It ran the query with the underlying data, and then it summarized all in a quick text response. And it starts to tell us, hey, like in mid-Feb, there's an acceleration in the scale of channels. Perhaps we did a paid budget expansion, or maybe there's a conversion efficiency, which might be more interesting. Of course, if we raise the budget, we would know that. But if there have been improvements in conversions, and perhaps we're not fully aware of those conversion improvements, that could be something to diagnose. Get all of this with just a single prompt. AppsFlyer has a bunch of reports, bunch of widgets and charts throughout it, but it can be overwhelming. There's a lot of data that comes at you from different sources, and if you're not fully comfortable with mobile attribution, it might be overwhelming enough that you just don't do it. So by having easy prompts and easy ways to summarize the data, we can start to have this natural conversation, basically with this data analyst, AI data analyst, to get a sense of what's actually going on in our apps and what are some of the areas of improvement that we could explore further. Let's ask it, what areas of improvement should I be aware of? Now, with any LLM, you need to double check everything it tells you. There's a healthy level of skepticism that is needed when interacting with these tools. But I think they're a fantastic starting point to dig through the data and to try to get closer to those actionable insights, which is really what we all care about. In this case, we're told that we are heavily reliant on paid installs, perhaps trying to improve our organic share of installs by exploring a few different strategies like ASO or brand search capture could be things to consider. There's some inconsistencies in our paid budget. You can start to figure out if there's any creative fatigue, any budget pacing issues, maybe the budget's not being deployed consistently throughout the month, and so on. Some of them may be relevant, some of them may be completely crazy, you can ignore them, but at least you have a sense as to where to go next. Approach number 2 are agents. If we go back to the AppsFlyer interface, then we are going to see the agent hub right here. You can see there are several agents that AppsFlyer has created. We have a deep research analysis where it looks at all your data and tries to provide insights based on the data, maybe configuration issues. There's executive summaries that focus more on high-level data that an executive might be interested in. Think things like CPI, install trends, less technical issues, maybe any performance anomalies, anti-fraud, and a couple other things. Now, the setup of an agent is pretty simple. Inside the AppsFlyer interface, you can choose to deploy an agent. You can give your agent a name, whatever that means for you. Then you choose your apps. In this case, for example, we can choose the exact same 2 gaming apps that we have been using for this entire analysis. And then we can choose where we want to receive the results, whether that is Slack or email. And we can choose how many emails receive this report. And then you choose a schedule, which right now is only weekly on Monday. I imagine there'll be other schedule possibilities in the future, either daily or every 2 weeks or every month. And that's it. Then you deploy the agent. And actually, I deploy one here, so you can see. Once you have it, then it simply starts to do the work. First time you deploy an agent, it runs it once. And again, this actually might take a little bit longer. I think in previous experiments, it's somewhere between 30 minutes to 60 minutes every time it runs. And then it will run again next Monday, 30 to 60 minutes. You're likely not going to see it running. You just simply see the output that it delivers every Monday. Let me show you what the output actually looks like for this deep research analysis. you're going to get an email that looks something like this. It simply tells you what are the key performance trends, maybe any unusual dips or spikes in your data. It will look at some configuration issues or technical things that you should be aware of and that you should tackle. It's a very short email. I just take a few minutes to read. And again, maybe half of it is not relevant at any given moment, but the other half, or maybe one or two insights, could be interesting to say, hey, what is going on? Should we look into that? You can also build agents using outside tools, things like Zapier or the N8N workflows, where you take this data and send it somewhere else. It just depends on your level of expertise with agents. I find this out-of-the-box agents to be good because you can see it just takes 60 seconds to create one, and then you can get this weekly report with the possibility of insights. I think as always, the quality of insights will vary depending on how much data you have, how well set up your app is, how many technical issues you might be dealing with at any given moment. And I see agents almost as a insurance. Here's this weekly thing that may surface some insights for you. I do think the MCP approach, if we go back to that, can be a little bit more useful because you're prompting it. You're looking at the data you get back, and then you go back and forth. You can, within 30 minutes, you can go back and forth multiple times and get to an insight, versus this is more reliant on what it's outputted from the analysis, from everything that has happened in the previous 7 days, so the previous 30 days, which could be more hit or miss. And I'm sure it's something that will improve over time as it gets more fine-tuned to the specific things that someone might care about. One more thing of agents, if you're not receiving the emails, you have to double check your notifications. They're actually here in the top right, and then notifications. And there is an option here called AI capabilities, which is what determines if you will receive the weekly reports that agents output. If you're like me and you tend to aggressively unsubscribe from emails, this may be a reason why you don't see any of the agent emails. Approach number 3 is the MCP, which stands for the Model Context Protocol. Now, the MCP can be connected to different tools. You may have seen MCP connections inside your favorite LLM, Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, and then you can have a natural conversation with whatever the MCP is connected to. So if you go that route, it will actually kind of look something like this. You're effectively just querying the AppsFlyer data through Claude, and then Claude can build charts, reports, summaries, all from your AppsFlyer data. Pretty cool. It can be a pretty handy way to interact with data. However, I want to show you something that's a little bit more advanced, and we can take the AppsFlyer data and put it into a workflow, and MCP is the critical piece that makes the workflow possible. I'm going to use a tool called N8N. There's other alternatives. Zapier can work here as well. But effectively, this is what we're going to build. We're going to build a workflow where we have some kind of start or trigger. Then we have different steps. And then we have some kind of output, whether to Slack, email, and there's really hundreds of apps that can output here. Let's log into an 8N account, and I'm going to create a new workflow. You get a blank canvas. So you can go step by step. You can use some of the AI functionality to build out the workflow as you see fit. But we have a third option as well, which is we can import a template into our workflow. Now, AppsFlyer has been building up their templates for N8N specifically. Here's one template for an executive summary, which is what we're going to use here. And there are actually steps here with screenshots, but the main thing we're looking for is actually this JSON file. If we take a quick peek at the JSON structure, we can see that it's really just providing the placeholders for the different steps along the way. And we're going to copy the link to the GitHub, go back to our workflow, and then in the 3 buttons here, we are going to import from URL. You can also upload the same JSON. We're going to give it the same URL. And then we get this template already built out, which is pretty cool. Let's go a little bit bigger. We start here at the left. When the workflow is executed, then we're going to go through some of these predefined fields. We're going to do the AI agent work here. This is where we're actually going to talk to the MCP and talk to ChatGPT through the API. And then we're going to send an email. This is our roughly 3-step workflow. Let's edit the key things here. First, since we're going to send an email, we have to give the different email addresses here. You could have multiple addresses as you see fit. Ooh, see if I can type. That's okay. I'm just going to use one email address for this example. Then we have the app name. In this case, we actually need the app ID. This is the Android format, the com.app name. iOS usually has a number. It might be like ID and then something like 7 or 8 numbers. Whatever it is, you enter here. And then we have the last days to analyze. We want 30, and that's it. And if you have multiple apps, what you're going to do is actually just have multiple rows. So you can duplicate all this and simply just put it below it, and then you have your second app, if you have, let's say, iOS and Android, and they can go through the same workflow, or they can live in the same workflow, but you have multiple rows. Okay, I'm just going to delete this as we don't need this anymore. Now in the AI agent, we see the prompt. Here we have some templates. You can see there are some placeholders that's being used. This is where we get the last days to analyze that we enter in the previous field. This is the prompt that's going to be given to the LLM, in this case, ChatGPT. This doesn't have to be edited, but if you want to, you can tweak it. Let's do the OpenAI model. We have an OpenAI account. We can actually use free OpenAI credits if you want just test links. And then we're going to have the model that we care about. Again, if you don't have any preference, this will just be default. And then sampling temperature can also be default at 0.1. So it looks good. You can see that there was a small red icon here that showed that this wasn't complete. Now we go to the MCP. Again, because we got this from the template already, from the JSON file, there's a bunch of things already filled out. So this is the AppsFlyer MCP URL. Then we have credentials that we need. Now, I do have an account for credentials, but I can show you what it looks like to create new ones. Typically, it's going to ask you for a token. And this is the MCP token that you can get from your AppsFlyer account. I'm going to copy and paste that here. Save that. And now we have our account. Everything else remains the same. Again, this all comes from the template, so we're good. Then we're going to convert it to file. And again, there's some instructions here, but we don't have to touch this. This is going to create an HTML attachment. And then for the message, then we also need credentials here to be able to send messages. In this case, I'm just using the SSO from Gmail. I have a Gmail account. You can add this account. In this case, it uses the sign in with Google. I'm going to close that. So you can add your own Gmail account. And if you want something else, maybe you want to use your own SMPT server or an equivalent, you can then find a different way of doing it. It wouldn't be the Gmail icon. It would be some other email icon. And down here, again, these are all just things that came from the template. What the subject line will be. The to would be the destination emails that we set in that very first step. And then the message is just HTML, which again, you can edit if you desire. And then we have an attachment that we're going to generate. That is the changes we have to do. It takes a few minutes building from this existing template. Let's run it to see if we get any errors. Okay, we have one error. We can see it happen in the OpenAI model. Let's see what's going on. It says the temperature does not support 0.1 with this model. Okay, let's make it 1 instead. And let's run it again. All right, we're back. The workflow executed correctly this time. It took about maybe 3 minutes. It has to go to the AI model, process the data, and then generate the email. It's pretty fast. In most cases, you would actually just schedule this workflow to run on its own, maybe once per week. You wouldn't really be waiting for the workflow to complete. Let's go see what the output looked like, which is an email. Here's the email I just received, right? We can see the same subject line we saw earlier. We see the HTML structure from the email. It's just simply telling us what's inside. And then there is an HTML file that was generated by the AI model, taking the AppsFlyer data through the MCP. Let's go look at that. And the dashboard looks like this. We have the same app we use, the Android gaming app the AppsFlyer provides as demo. We have 30 days worth of data. We can see it was generated today. And then we get quick metrics here at the top left, a quick snapshot, some key performance, any metadata that might be relevant, any signals, any sort of things that we should be aware of, and actionable recommendations. They're all very cool. Now, if you wanted to change this, you would be editing the generation of the HTML file that gets attached to this email, which is a step before the Gmail icon. You could have used your favorite LLM to actually edit that while keeping some of those placeholders the AppsFlyer provides. You could build upon this. You could add more files if you wanted to. You could try and get more insights. Whatever is supported by the AppsFlyer API could be added here in a relatively straightforward fashion. If we go back to our workflow, remember that this is a nice workflow, but we can keep adding steps. There's all kinds of apps that we can use, right? We have Slack, we have all the Google apps, and hundreds of other apps. Whatever you might want to do here, where you want to maybe take this data into some kind of dashboarding tool, maybe like a Looker dashboard, maybe whatever it is, there's likely a way to do it. It just requires a little bit of tinkering to get this working. And then once it does work, then you could schedule this to run automatically and just simply receive that email once per week. This is awesome as it gives you lots of flexibility on what steps you want to take, what data you're using, what's the prompt that you want to give the AI model. You could have swap out the AI model here. Perhaps you prefer the Claude model or Gemini model or something else. You can just take that node and replace it with something else. And the core structure remains the same. Be sure to check out the documentation for the MCP and for more of this advanced workflows. I think there's a lot of potential here. It's just a matter of what do you want to do? What does your imagination wish you could do with your AppsFlyer data? And then how do you build that in the NAN workflow? Those are the 3 AI approaches you can use to analyze your AppsFlyer data. Whatever you choose, I think extracting insights from AppsFlyer data is becoming even easier now that you have a bunch of tools that removes the need for you to be a full-time data analyst. And that, I think, makes me really excited. Don't stop here, though. Make sure you watch the next video on how to extract more insights out of your AppsFlyer data. My name is Ruben Garta, and I'll see you in the next video.